G'day YouTube, Max right here, and I've got a really fun interview here today. So I've worked really hard to get this interview, and it's part of a whole series of interviews about something which I think is possibly the most important thing since the invention of Bitcoin, and that is a project called THORCHAIN. And today I have with me here Michael. Michael, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Max.
Michael, would you take just a quick little bit of time? Actually, before we get into this, I just want everybody to know I'm probably, if you see a video linked right above here, I'm probably going to make another video as a precursor to this to give you an intro to THORCHAIN and help you understand about why I think it's so important and get the basics up and running. So if that link appears above me right now, I suggest you pause this video, click on that link, watch that video, then come back to this video. With that being said, Michael, would you take a few moments to let us know a little bit about yourself and what what THORCHAIN does and what your connection to it is, please?
Sure, I'd be happy to. My name is Michael Perklin, and I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for SHAPESHIFT. SHAPESHIFT is a platform, an interface, a website and mobile app that you can use to interact with a variety of blockchains and swap assets back and forth. What's interesting is that with this interface, with SHAPESHIFT, you are not swapping with a company. You are not giving over your coins to a company to hold and swap on your behalf. You are swapping your own coins with a decentralized system that does not have any owner. My history, I've been involved in the blockchain space for over a decade, having first worked with Bitcoin in 2010. I founded the world's first blockchain security consulting firm in 2012. I joined SHAPESHIFT in 2014 after having served on the Bitcoin Foundation board, the Bitcoin Alliance of Canada board, and have had the pleasure and privilege to provide consultation to governments about Bitcoin and blockchain technology. And I'm a big supporter of the decentralized world that we're all building together.
Awesome. Great intro.
Oh, I just realized I forgot the second half of your question, how I'm involved with THORCHAIN.
Yeah, and what is THORCHAIN and how are you involved?
Yeah, so I first found THORCHAIN only mid-2020. It promised to be a completely decentralized way of swapping assets without any middlemen, without giving custody over of your funds. And this seemed like a holy grail. When I joined SHAPESHIFT in 2014, the reason why I joined SHAPESHIFT in 2017. SHAPESHIFT was founded in 2014. But the reason why I joined SHAPESHIFT was because the model was very different to most exchanges out there. With most exchanges, they were very centralized and custodial. You give your Bitcoin to an exchange, and then they hold your Bitcoin. You can trade back and forth, and then when you're done, you request a withdrawal from them, and you hope that they're going to say yes. They can say no. SHAPESHIFT was very different at the time. You give one asset, you get another asset. It was very much like a vending machine. You put in your dollar, and then you get your M&Ms out a second later. That was how SHAPESHIFT was doing all of its trades, and that model flew in the face of the way that all the other exchanges were building, which required you to submit KYC documentation, utility bills, and it created a lot of friction for using Bitcoin. SHAPESHIFT attracted me because it was just a pure user interface. It was very easy to swap in and out. In 2018, we were forced to add KYC because we were trading with many people and we had to know our customers. But
just for a split second, you guys were custodians of the funds. You would receive, you'd be holding for a second, and you'd give back. And that second,
back then, yes,
that second counted. That means that now all of a sudden you had the whole KYC AML headache, and you've been locked in that world since then until THORCHAIN.
That's right. As I mentioned, I first ran into THORCHAIN mid last year, and it fascinated me instantly because of the promise. It was going to be a completely non-custodial, decentralized way to swap assets on their native blockchains. Up until then, there have been many other swapping systems that required you to first convert your token so you can swap it. Ethereum is currently the king of DeFi, and there are tons and tons of different liquidity pools and swapping systems on Ethereum, but it only works with Ethereum-based assets. If you want to swap Bitcoin, you cannot use Ethereum. You can maybe wrap your Bitcoin, lock up one Bitcoin on the Bitcoin chain, issue a fake Bitcoin token on the Ethereum chain. Now you can swap those fake those fake Bitcoin tokens all you want, but that's not real Bitcoin. And there's the risk that that bridge where you moved your real Bitcoin into fake Bitcoin, what if that disappears tomorrow? That fake token is worth one Bitcoin as long as that bridge exists, because tomorrow I can, move it back through the bridge and get real Bitcoin. But if that bridge disappears, you're SOL, and now you have all these fake Bitcoin tokens on Ethereum land that are not real. THORCHAIN promised to deliver this, and that's a pretty tall order, because at SHAPESHIFT, we had spent a lot of time in R&D trying to think of how to do that, because we recognized that even though we were non-custodial, we were still centralized, and everybody that was trading with SHAPESHIFT was trading with SHAPESHIFT. We were the counterparty of every trade. With custodial models, the counterparty of every trade is another user. Max deposits $5, Mike deposits a percentage of a Bitcoin, and Mike and Max trade with each other on Binance's exchange, and Binance takes a small cut while Mike and Max go back and forth. With SHAPESHIFT, Mike gives money to SHAPESHIFT, SHAPESHIFT gives another type of money to Mike, and so it's very fast. But how do you do this in a decentralized way? And THORCHAIN actually did solve it. Their tech, so as an engineer, I dove right in. I knew a lot about security, I knew a lot about crypto, I knew a lot about these protocols, so I wanted to review it to see how close were they to making their claim. Because it's one thing to say something, it's a totally different thing to deliver. We've seen, Max, I'm sure you've seen over the years, so many ICOs raising money on a promise that ultimately fails to deliver. And when I took a look at THORCHAIN and I saw how it was working and the different types of technologies it was being built on and the way that they were stitching these technologies together, I realized that they had a very credible shot at doing this. And as I was reviewing it, I had a very similar feeling that it was familiar to me, but I felt that feeling in a long time. And it was the same feeling that I got when I was reviewing Bitcoin. Because with Bitcoin, I was incredulous. This can't really work without a middleman. You can't have a decentralized database of people's funds, because what if Max alters his set and now says that, hey, he has twice as many coins? If I have a wallet DAT file, can't I just duplicate it times 2, times 4, times 8, times 16 Bitcoin? And there's no central authority to keep that in check. So Bitcoin is impossible. And as I was reviewing it, I realized, going on every single side, trying to break it this way, trying to break it this way, trying to break it this way, Bitcoin works because of the beautiful alignment of technology and incentives. The way that Satoshi designed it, miners are incentivized to do the right thing because that's how they're going to make their money as they create new tokens. The incentives drive user behavior to do the right thing by the system. And when I was reviewing THORCHAIN, sure, there's a lot of technical components, but the way that they were stitched together drove the liquidity providers to want to make money on their Bitcoin or make money on their Ether. It drove the arbitragers to make sure that the liquidity pools are always in balance. It drove the network operators to spend thousands of dollars a month to run complicated servers to keep this decentralized system running, because then they would earn money there. And all the incentives were aligned so beautifully. It really reminded me of the first time I looked at Bitcoin and I first fully understood it. And I said, wow, this is going to be big.
This is exactly my feeling as well. Like I said, it's up at the show. I haven't been as excited about something until Bitcoin. Like it's not since Bitcoin that I've been as excited since I saw THORCHAIN. So I think now is a good time to maybe just take a step on that. Where did I want to? I just had a question in my mind and it fell out of my head. Don't you hate when that happens? Yes. Let's just touch briefly on the history of atomic swaps, why this is different to that, and let's talk about the journey from peer-to-peer to peer-to-pool. Take it away.
Sure, not a problem. So atomic swaps have been around for a while, and
What is an atomic swap?
um, an atomic swap is a protocol that two participants can use to swap one asset for another. So for example, if Max has some Bitcoin and Mike has some Litecoin, and they agree on a price between them, they can set up a swap between them so that Mike locks his Litecoin up temporarily, Max locks his Bitcoin up temporarily. We both send each other the unlock code in a way where when Max unlocks Mike's Bitcoin, Mike also receives Max, or Litecoin receives the Bitcoin. It's two interdependent locks, and unlocking one automatically releases the coins to the other person. So there's no way for Mike to trick Max and take his Bitcoin without giving the Litecoin in exchange. Now, this is great, but it has some problems. It requires both participants, Mike and Max, to agree on two variables. We have to agree on the exchange rate of Bitcoin to Litecoin, and we also have to agree on an amount to trade. Sure, we may agree that 5 Litecoin equals 1 Bitcoin or whatever the exchange rate is there, but what if I want to trade 100 Litecoin and you only want to trade 50 Litecoin? Well, then we can do half a swap, and then I still have to find another participant, agree on two variables again with another participant for the second half of my swap, and I have to break it up into smaller pieces. This is one big issue with atomic swaps. While they are decentralized, it requires a lot of back and forth, and it requires people to break up their trades into smaller ones, to the smallest trade that is acceptable for both users.
And if I can just interrupt here, 2013, this concept of atomic swap was a pipe dream. Some people were thinking about it. They believed they could do it. It was a huge promise. I think, but there was Bitcoin, Litecoin, and like 5 other
They really
coins.
did it. They didn't just believe it. They really did it. It worked.
Oh, I know, but in 2013, not then. In 2013, it was this was like there was some brilliant people hypothesizing they could do it. Well, they did it, and it was done, I think, way back in 15, 16, 17, something like that.
There were atomic swaps performed in 2013.
Oh, they really were. There you go. Thank you for the correction. Thank you for the correction. And so, yeah, that really did happen for people to switch coins trustlessly. But as Mike was saying, it didn't really grow into what we had hoped was a full-fledged exchange because of this issue. Transitioning now into, that was called peer-to-peer. Trading was one with another. Along comes the concept of peer-to-pool, and take it away again, please.
Yeah, a project called Bancor pioneered the liquidity pool model with blockchain systems. Instead of trading with another person, you trade with a big bag of money instead. Now, with liquidity pools, there are a few different types of participants. There's the swapper, like the Mike and the Max, who want to swap Litecoin for Bitcoin or Bitcoin for Litecoin. But then there's another participant as well, the liquidity provider, or the LP. I like to think of him as, or her as, a Scrooge McDuck-like person with just big bags of money. Somebody who has some money and wants to earn interest on that money. A liquidity provider will go to a pool and deposit two types of assets, usually in equal amounts. For example, they will put Bitcoin in, and then they will put Litecoin in. Now there's a pile of Bitcoin and Litecoin there. Whenever Max wants to trade one for the other, Max pushes Bitcoin into this pool, adding more Bitcoin to the Bitcoin side, and then he pulls Litecoin from the pool to remove some Litecoin from the pool. Whether Max wants to swap 1 Litecoin, 5 Litecoin, 10 Litecoin, or 100, as long as the pool is sufficiently deep, he can push that into one side and get the other side out. So now, rather than deciding on two variables, the current price of the asset and the quantity to swap, Max only needs to worry about one, the current price, and then he can push as much as he's willing to trade into the pool for the other side. This makes it a lot easier for Max to get the swap that he wants. You don't have to coordinate between multiple parties and figure out the lowest common trade amount between the people. The user interface is far easier. And on top of that, there are other participants in the system who benefit from this. A third person, Mr. Scrooge McDuck liquidity provider, he now made a fraction of a Bitcoin or a fraction of a Litecoin when Max did this swap. So multiple people get happy, and it's all decentralized.
Yeah, and so enter THORCHAIN. This is where it's broad. It's the culmination of so many different technologies. And by the way, this concept of liquidity provider now with Uniswap and the peer-to-pool concept, this is what's used in Uniswap and other things like that. And so this concept has been fleshed out quite considerably. And so we enter THORCHAIN, and relatively recently, and maybe you can help us out with the data on this, but THORCHAIN managed to bring this concept of peer-to-pool to cross-chain exchanges. And maybe we could jump into the future now. That is the big, what I'm calling an absolutely cataclysmic leap of what's happened. And like I said, the most exciting thing that I've heard in this space since I heard Bitcoin itself. And so maybe you can bring us into the future and tell us, you know, how recently this was done, and actually how much is being traded, and what we've discovered, the problems, what needs to be solved. Give us the skinny.
Yeah. First off, I agree with you. I think this is the most important development in the blockchain space since Bitcoin itself. I know there are many technologies being built on Bitcoin, including Lightning, Liquid, smart contract layers like Rootstock and things like that. All of these, in my opinion, pale in comparison to what THORCHAIN brings to Bitcoin. With all these liquidity pools that existed on Ethereum, they only worked on Ethereum-based assets, and they did not work on the most important blockchain-based asset in the world, which is Bitcoin. THORCHAIN brought these liquidity pools to Bitcoin, and they improved on the design that Bancor first made years ago, in that all the supported cryptocurrencies in the THORCHAIN ecosystem are pooled against one asset type only, RUNE. This is different from how all the automated market makers, all these liquidity pools work on Ethereum. With Ethereum, you could make a pair between Ether and wrapped Bitcoin, or between the Sushi token and the Uni token, or between any arbitrary token. And what happens is these pools end up being fragmented. The Ethereum-based pool is now split into 100 pools with Ethereum and this asset, Ethereum and that asset, Ethereum and the other asset. So the liquidity gets divided, and now the maximum trade that somebody could perform is necessarily lower. What THORCHAIN is doing is they're pairing every single asset with their own native token, the RUNE. So there is a Bitcoin RUNE pool, there is a Litecoin RUNE pool, there is an Ethereum RUNE pool. And in doing it this way, we don't need to create a Bitcoin to Litecoin pool or an Ethereum to Cosmos pool, because everything can go between RUNE in the center. This dramatically reduces the number of pools that are necessary, and it consolidates the liquidity into much deeper pools. Now, if somebody wants to trade 10,000 at a time, 50,000 or $100,000 worth of Bitcoin at a time, they can, and they don't need to split it up across multiple pools or multiple trades or multiple atomic swaps.
Yeah, it really adds to the depth of any given pair. Now, most importantly, in addition, this is how it works under the hood, but what is another incredible leap of brilliance, I think, is that the user experience does not see this at all. If you want to go, if you show up with Bitcoin and you want to get some Litecoin, you don't need to have any room to pay fees to the network to achieve this. And please correct me if I'm wrong anywhere along the ways, Michael. You just show up with your Bitcoin, you transfer your Bitcoin, and out pops whatever it is you want, Litecoin or whatever. But what in the background, what's happened is you've gone through two relatively very deep pools. You've gone Bitcoin to RUNE and then RUNE to Litecoin. And any fees that you had to pay were paid in Bitcoin. So, I mean, this is just an unbelievably clean and good user experience. And where this concept is really, really good. It's the same experience when you go into like Binance or any other thing. It's like you can't go from like random altcoin to random altcoin. Usually you've got to go via Bitcoin because that's where the depth
or USD
is. Yeah, or USD.
Yes.
It's where the depth is in the pool. But this is where like Uni kind of had that problem random altcoin to out, those pools never got deep enough to be useful. So you'd still have to go via the big pools. And this is where RUNE has come in. Okay, I think that's a really good start of like where RUNE is. So now I've got some questions written down here. Forgive me for looking at my phone here every now and again, but I want to jump into some questions, which we might be skipping a few pieces here, but again, if you watch that video, there's a precursor to this video. It might fill in some gaps. We'll cover some topics. But while I've got Michael on the line, I want to ask some hopefully more challenging questions. I do want to just confirm the entire Thor project is open source. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. Very much like Bitcoin, all the development for THORCHAIN happens completely open for the world to see. The original developers were pseudonymous, just like Satoshi Nakamoto was, and they released their code to the world for anybody to run on their own, review on their own, and use. And it continues to run as a decentralized system, and the original developers have stated a goal that they will obsolete themselves by 2022.
Okay.
Right now, they're still guiding the development because they're the most familiar with the system, but more and more engineers are getting involved with the project. I mentioned that I found the project just last year. Through my involvement, they've promoted a variety of people in the community to Telegram administrators. They've given them rotating access to the Twitter account, so it's not run by them centrally. And anybody can submit these Git PRs and review on them. There will be a day tomorrow when these founders, whoever they are, simply disappear because they'll be just as unnecessary for THORCHAIN's success as Satoshi Nakamoto is for Bitcoin's success.
Gotcha. So, okay, and just a fascinating piece of trivia here that I heard is like just to understand just how difficult cross-native chain swap is. Uniswap, I heard, was something in the order of 500 lines of code. THORCHAIN is in the order of 150,000 lines of code just for core, and then there's a lot of things around the peripherals that's even needed on top of that. So
yeah, although you can't compare apples to oranges like that, but yes, there is definitely a lot more involved with THORCHAIN's system.
Gotcha. So now the whole thing. So now I want to put my investor hat on, and I want to understand the proposition of investing in THORCHAIN today or tomorrow or not at all. And given the fact that it's open source, kind of got the same issue. What I'm wondering is two things. Do more competitors make the ecosystem more robust or less robust in your opinion? A. B, is there any kind of moat around THORCHAIN that would make being a competitor difficult?
Great questions. Like Bitcoin, the more participants in the THORCHAIN ecosystem, the more valuable THORCHAIN is. Bitcoin would be useless if only Satoshi had all the coins. But because you and I have some coins and everybody, it's distributed quite widely through the globe, Bitcoin has value. Similar for the THORCHAIN system. The more liquidity providers decide, I want to earn interest on my Bitcoin, and hey, I have 1 Bitcoin, and tomorrow I want to have 1.1 Bitcoin or 1.2 Bitcoin. The more people that do that, the deeper the liquidity pools are. The deeper the liquidity pools are, the cheaper the swaps are for you and I who go to trade Litecoin for Ether or Bitcoin for whatever. Yeah, for your first question, the more the better.
The more Thorn uses, the better.
Yes, the more participants, the better it is for everybody.
Yes.
And it will continue to get better the more people use it. Your second question about a moat. This is one of there are 3 fascinating things about THORCHAIN that I really love and made me lock onto it. And this is number 3 for me. With THORCHAIN, it is its own exchange. I've had many people ask me, hey, I'm interested in buying the RUNE token. What exchange is it on? Oh, it's not supported by my exchange, or I'm a US user and I can't go to Binance because Binance doesn't allow US users, so I'm locked out. I can't buy RUNE. The reality is, THORCHAIN is its own exchange. All you need to do is have one of its supported assets, which right now I think there's about 10 or 15 different assets. You can send Bitcoin in and get RUNE out. And you don't need to sign up on Binance or any exchange. You just need some of any of its supported assets.
Gotcha.
You use THORCHAIN to get THORCHAIN.
I like it. I like it. Now, what about a moat? So I'm specifically I'm thinking about the example of SushiSwap coming along and stealing some of Uniswap's thunder. You know, what is there any kind of moat around it that would make it difficult for people to come in, rip off the code, create a cool incentive program, and steal some of THORCHAIN's thunder?
Now I understand what you meant by moat. Because the code is open source, anybody can fork it and tweak it and run their own copy. But just like Bitcoin, yes, you've now tweaked Bitcoin and now you have a different copy of Bitcoin, but that copy is useless unless you have participants, unless you have people who will choose to run the code and interact with your network. Mm-hmm. Copying the code is the easiest part. It's building the community around it that is difficult. THORCHAIN, the original THORCHAIN founders and devs, whoever they are, they've done a great job of making sure that everything is open and transparent in the way that they conducted all their business, and making sure that all the incentives are aligned so that people don't participate just because they're altruistically believing in the project, or they like the logo, or they have got a bunch of bags and they want to pump their bags. People participate because it is financially advantageous to them to do it. Whether you are an LP, you are a swapper, you are an arbitrager, or you are a node operator, the 4 types of people who get involved with THORCHAIN, every single one of them can profit from using THORCHAIN. So because everybody is acting in their own selfish profit motive, everybody works with the system to make it run. The alignment there keeps everybody working together.
Gotcha. Okay, understood. What was my next one here? Oh yeah, here's a fun one. What is what's the biggest challenge with the project that is yet to be solved? Something that just you guys don't have a solution for. If you could just get this, you'd be really, really happy. You could wave a magic wand and solve the problem. Is there anything that really sticks out in your mind as like, man, I'd love to solve this issue?
Yes, although this is not going to be an issue for a couple of years. Right now, THORCHAIN is still growing. Right now, there's only a handful of assets that are supported, and of those supported assets, there's an artificial cap imposed on the liquidity pools right now. Right now, as of today, the cap is 1.5 million RUNE, which in the grand scheme of things is very tiny. It's a tiny drop in the bucket compared to the amount of trade volume that goes through all the major exchanges. All that is going to solve itself as the technology matures, the caps are raised and more liquidity enters. But when we start adding the 5th chain, 6th chain, 10th chain, 20th chain, eventually we will run into a problem where one of these decentralized servers that are running on the internet that help THORCHAIN run, there will be so many connected blockchains that each of these servers will need to run independently that it will become very difficult, if not impossible, to keep it all running smoothly all the time. Having worked at SHAPESHIFT for many years, I see the problems that are inherent with running a Dogecoin node, a Bitcoin node, a Litecoin node, one of the Ethereum variants. They all have their subtle issues. They lock up, you got to restart them. Maybe there's a problem and now you have to manually resync that blockchain. It's fine when you're dealing with it with a small handful, but when we get to 100 chains, it will be too difficult. Now, there are theoretical solutions to these problems already, and luckily we don't have to tackle them now. There's plenty of short-term problems that the engineers are working on today, so we don't have to worry about that tomorrow. But when we get to that tomorrow, things like Cosmos's IBC, inter-blockchain communication, can assist. Things like sharding the validator set so that every validator doesn't have to validate every chain. Maybe these 100 validators validate Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, and 10 others. But then there's a separate set that validate this different set of 10 or 20 blockchains. And through multiple separate sets, now collectively, there are 1,000 supported blockchains. but each individual set only handles between 10 and 100. That's definitely an engineering challenge. I see it similar to the challenges that both Ethereum and Bitcoin are working to solve today with scaling the number of transactions per second. It's just a different type of technological scaling that will have to happen at some point in THORCHAIN, but that's tomorrow's problem.
Okay, good stuff, good stuff. Let me see. Now, at the moment, a liquidity provider can put in money to add some depth to the pools, and they earn fees and some kind of yield. By the way, is that what staking is in Thorn? Is that what staking is, or is staking something different?
There is no staking in THORCHAIN.
Okay.
Unlike other Cosmos-based blockchains like the Cosmos Hub, Terra, and these types of things, THORCHAIN doesn't have a concept of staking or a concept of delegating. With these other Cosmos-based blockchains, if you hold some atoms or you hold some Luna tokens, you can choose to say, hey, Max is running a validator. I believe in Max. I'm going to delegate my tokens to this other validator, and because I believe in the operation that they're running. And because I'm staking these, I'm going to earn a small yield. There's no concept of that in THORCHAIN. Instead, you earn yields in a different way, and that is through liquidity providing. By depositing money into the pools, you will earn fees, and that will make your bags grow. So the end result is the same, but the mechanic is very different.
Gotcha. And hang on. So, and as a liquidity provider, what's fascinating to me, the part that broke my mind before I kind of understood it, is that, okay, so people are buying Bitcoin, or they're buying something, so they're making a trade and then they're taking it off the exchange. So if I'm a liquidity provider, I am by definition volunteering to sell on anybody else's whim. And
yes.
and is that the case, and is that the way it actually works out in practice?
It is. So when you decide to give some of your money into the pools, the money is held trustlessly between many different servers on the THORCHAIN system. There's no one person or entity who can just take that money from you. It requires consensus from a variety of validating nodes to do anything with your money. While it's locked up in there, everybody who trades against that pool leaves a small amount of fees in that pool. And the more of those fees that accrue, the more and more yield your money earns you. This is very similar to what Bitcoin users enjoy with centralized services like BlockFi and Celsius. But in these cases, these Bitcoin users have to turn over their money to Celsius or BlockFi, give it to a completely different entity. Now they're earning their yield, yes, but when they request a withdrawal of their money, they're once again in the hope and pray model that you have with other centralized exchanges. With THORCHAIN, the same Bitcoin user can not only earn the same amount of yield, but they can earn more yield without trusting any individual entity. So it is better by pretty much every single metric. You will make more money, and you will not have the custodial risk of that entity shutting down. It is literally better in every single metric.
And for example, if someone was to deposit Bitcoin in the Bitcoin pool right now, what kind of yields would they be getting? Do you have data on that?
I can look it up right now. Just by visiting the THORCHAIN website, you can see the liquidity pools. Last time I checked, it was around 20%. Contrast this with what BlockFi is providing, which I think is around 2 or 3. It's 10x the yield of what you would get, right, and with significantly less custodial risk than what you would get.
All right. Now, are there other risks that need to be brought to the user's attention?
Always, yes. There's always going to be the risk of some kind of a flaw in the system. Mm-hmm. That risk exists today with Bitcoin. It exists today with Ethereum. It exists today with the smart contracts that are on Ethereum, and it does exist with THORCHAIN. The system is still quite new, and although it's been battle tested for the last couple of months in a smaller version of their network, there's never going to be any guarantees that tomorrow somebody isn't going to find a crazy flaw in the elliptic curve algorithm that breaks all of Bitcoin and in turn breaks all of THORCHAIN. Or somebody's going to find another flaw in the way that THORCHAIN handles liquidity additions and subtractions. We've all read the reports on DeFi contracts that had this bug or that bug, which allowed someone who takes a flash loan of a few million or a few $1 million, moves it through the system, and then they profit significantly because of a flaw in a smart contract. Now, what I can say is that regularly the people who are working on THORCHAIN, whether they are part of the original core team or one of the many new developers who are contributing their time and efforts to improve THORCHAIN today, they're always identifying issues and providing improvements. There are security fixes that go out before anybody knew that there was a security problem. I myself have reported at least 10 different security issues that have all been solved in a very short amount of time. The developers are attentive, and even if there's going to be a flaw, there is going to be a fix the very next day, just like what we've already seen many times with Bitcoin. In the early days, Satoshi would regularly release a fix to a flaw that happened in Bitcoin that created 1 billion Bitcoin tokens out of thin air or otherwise caused an issue. So yes, there's going to be problems, but those problems will be fixed.
Gotcha. Circling back to the liquidity providers, we said that what they're volunteering to do is to sell their Bitcoin, whatever they deposited into liquidity pools. They're volunteering to sell at a whim.
Yes.
However, there are arbitragers who maybe take that, just through incentive, volunteer, hopefully, to take that element away, so that the people who are depositing on the liquidity providers who are depositing into the pools don't necessarily miss out on their Bitcoin. If that's what they put in, they can take that out. And generally, the theory is they get all that back. Is that fair to say?
Yes, there are. Yes, it's fair to say. You're touching on a concept called impermanent loss, and that's quite a difficult concept to wrap your head around if you're new to automated market makers like these pools we're talking about.
Gotcha. And I'll ask you to skip over that impermanent loss, because I've found a really fun video that has visuals and explains it in a really, really cool way. I'll give that to my viewers, because without the visuals, it is quite a difficult concept to handle. So yeah, we'll skip over impermanent loss. But I did just want to circle back and say, as a depositor to this, well, technically true, you're volunteering to have people buy your Bitcoin at a whim. But in practice, you're generally expected to be able to pull out exactly what you put in plus your interest, because of another mechanism, which are these arbitrage people who are busy rebalancing the pools on a constant basis. It brings into the concept impermanent loss, but we'll save that one for another video. My next question here is, let's step into the world of Bitcoin meet DeFi. This is, I think, one of the most exciting parts of all of this. And I think what the Thor team is talking about is nicknaming THOR-FI. Can you help us understand a little bit? Right now, we just have basic token swaps between native chains, and there's a handful of chains that's working through it. And there's quite a little bit of a cap on the size of the pools. Actually, first question, before we get to THOR-FI, first question, how quickly are those caps being increased? Is basically the limitation the developers' comfort with the code? Is it the purpose of those limits? Is that to limit the risk for the users?
It's to limit risk, yes, for the users, for the node operators, and just for the system health itself. A lot of bugs were found in the first week or two of the THORCHAIN launch. And while everyone was yelling for, hey, let's raise the caps, let's increase the liquidity, the more liquidity that comes in, the more users will run into these bugs. There was a flurry of pull requests that solved this bug, solved that problem, solved the other problem. When SHAPESHIFT integrated THORCHAIN, our users immediately became the most heavy users of the THORCHAIN system. And we at SHAPESHIFT had a front row seat to all the very early problems that come along with any new system. But through reporting them, every single one got fixed and got fixed and got fixed. And then the caps were raised. More money came in, more people did swaps, and then another tiny bug here, another tiny bug there. These were more cosmetic bugs. Okay, we'll fix this, and then they raise the caps again. Each iteration, there are fewer and fewer bugs being found. The code is being more battle tested, and everybody gets more comfortable with the system so that the caps can be raised. Yeah. To answer your question specifically, I don't have visibility into whoever the THORCHAIN developer or founders are and what choices they make. But from my point of view, sitting outside of the system as a participant in the system, I think they've been making very wise decisions on when to raise the caps. Usually there's a flurry of fixes and then a raise of the caps, and then wait a week, and then a flurry of fixes, then another raise of the caps. And I think that's a very reserved way of doing it, and it's very prudent. Yes,
I agree with you. So now, with how many weeks has THORCHAIN been live? What's the currently main product?
The current version of THORCHAIN went live on April 13th, I believe, or April 12th. It was the day before the Coinbase launch. And that was a very interesting week because on the one hand, you had this highly centralized, highly custodial system going public on an exchange service that was only available to a small handful of investors. And then you had THORCHAIN, which launched without any fanfare of going public, and it was immediately usable by every single person on the planet. You know, which one was more public? The current version that is live is being called CHAOSNet, because it's the very first version that is using real world money on these multi-chain swaps. If the CHAOSNet runs for a few weeks or a month without any new bugs, without any new fixes, and the caps can be removed entirely and everything is still running healthily, then CHAOSNet will be renamed to mainnet, and that will trigger the beginning of the end for the founders of THORCHAIN, where they will go by forever and we'll just be left with the product that they've created for us.
Nice. Okay, let's pick up the conversation we had on THOR-FI. What do we have in store, and won't hold you to it, but best guess timelines?
Great questions. If you're familiar with all the DeFi capabilities that are on the Ethereum ecosystem and now on the Binance Smart Chain ecosystem, you'll be very familiar with what will be coming in THOR-FI. You'll be able to take loans against your liquidity. You'll be able to automate paying back the loans in different ways. Specific feature lists have not been announced or publicized, but just from watching the code that's being committed, you can see that all the very familiar features that things like Curve, Yearn, Sushi and Uniswap, and all these DeFi Legos are building will be available on THORCHAIN. And the fascinating thing is, they're not going to be isolated to one ecosystem like all the Ethereum ones are. They will work with your native assets. It's like buying a Tesla and then tomorrow you get a software update and now your Tesla can do brand new features that you did not buy with the original car. Bitcoin will all of a sudden inherit a crazy amount of DeFi capabilities when it never had them yesterday. And that's again why I'll repeat what I said towards the beginning of the call. THORCHAIN is building more for Bitcoin than any other project I know that is building on Bitcoin today.
So that's maybe a really good time to segue into something that I'm trying to wrap my head around. And we're primarily an investment channel here at Contrarian Dude. And the thing that I'm trying to wrap my head around is, what does this mean for Bitcoin dominance? And so I'm going to just throw that up in the air out for you. What do you think it means for Bitcoin dominance in the future?
If you're a Bitcoin maximalist, I think THORCHAIN gives you more reason to be bullish on Bitcoin alone. Because right now, if you want to take advantage of all these DeFi capabilities, you have to either wrap your Bitcoin onto the Ethereum chain, or you have to convert your Bitcoin into Ether to use all these smart contracts with Ethereum. It harms Bitcoin's dominance. But if all these capabilities are available to you, a native Bitcoin user, without wrapping your Bitcoin or selling your Bitcoin, it makes your Bitcoin more valuable. It gives less incentives for people to trade away from Bitcoin and leave the Bitcoin ecosystem into something else like Binance Smart Chain or Ethereum. So I think THORCHAIN helps the Bitcoin maximalist case. And this touches on my first reason for why I think THORCHAIN is such a big game changer. And that's the fact that it's the first blockchain-based system that anybody can use without holding or touching the native token of that blockchain-based system. This has never happened before. If you want to use an Ethereum smart contract, you need Ethereum's native token, Ether, to pay for the gas to run that contract. If you want to use a Binance system or any smart contract on the Binance system, you need to have that token to pay its gas. But with THORCHAIN, you can take advantage of all of THORCHAIN's capabilities without ever holding RUNE, without ever touching RUNE, and only using Bitcoin itself. No system has ever done that before, and that's another big game changer for THORCHAIN.
I completely agree with you on the significance and importance of that. So it sounded like that was your reason number one. You alluded to having three earlier. You've given us one, you've given us three. What was number two?
Great question. So yeah, number one is you don't need the native token. Number two is the pricing mechanics of RUNE are deterministic and are fully calculable. What that means is, so I mentioned the incentives towards the beginning half of this call, and all the incentives I found are beautifully aligned, in my opinion, to making the system run healthy. THORCHAIN has a concept of insurance or a bond. If there's a lot of money in these liquidity pools, what happens if that money gets robbed? Well, the good news is for every dollar that's in one of these pools, there's $2 at least of a bond or an insurance that someone has put up, that these node operators, the people who are running these servers to make THORCHAIN run, they have to put up millions of dollars of their own money for the privilege of earning lots of RUNE per day and keeping the system running. And if money ever disappears from one of the pools because these server operators, they didn't take cybersecurity into account and they left something open on their server, and now a hacker has gone in and a hacker has stolen some money from the pool. Well, they're robbing liquidity providers who are trying to earn yield on their Bitcoin. So the system will make these people whole by looking at the node operator who made the mistake, and they will take some of their bond to give it back to the liquidity pool to make all those users whole. This insurance mechanism helps keep the system safe. And when that happens, because of these insurance payments, there's always going to be approximately a 2-to-1 ratio between all the bond or all the insurance and everything that's in the pool. And then when you look at what's in the pool, everything is paired against RUNE. It's not just the Bitcoin pool, it's the Bitcoin RUNE pool, or it's the Ethereum RUNE pool. So it's like a nested 50% inside another 50%. Of the grand total assets in the THORCHAIN system, let's say there's 100 million assets in the THORCHAIN system. Half of that is going to be RUNE for bond. 50 million is going to be in the pools. That 50 million is going to be divided by 2. 25 million in native assets like the Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ether, and then 25 million in RUNE. So you end up getting approximately a three-way split: RUNE, and then assets. What this means is because everybody is incentivized to provide liquidity in 50% RUNE and 50% assets, and because the node operators are incentivized to keep 2-to-1 insurance, this drives incentives for the market, for the economics. And what ends up happening is you can calculate what the price of a RUNE should be by taking a look at all of the Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ether, and all the other native assets that are locked up, add up the US dollar value of all those assets, and then look at how many RUNE are in circulation, you can do a calculation and figure out what the price of one rune should be. I'd like to invite your listeners to visit thorchain.community. The website is thorchain.community. That has a brilliant little calculator that you can type in a couple of very simple numbers. What happens if only 1% of all Bitcoin in circulation are locked up in THORCHAIN? With 18.5 million Bitcoin in circulation, 1% is about 1,850. Okay, so 1850 Bitcoin are locked. And if the price of Bitcoin stays the same, exactly what it is today, what does that translate to a rune price? And now, what if only 0.5% of Ether is locked and the price goes down by 20%? You can play with these numbers and calculate what the price of Rune will be in these conditions. And the numbers that come out of that are quite staggering.
I haven't seen that website, but I'm pretty good at math and I've done it in my head, and I completely agree with you. If you look at what happened to Uniswap and how quickly those pools grew and how deep those pools are, and then you do this simple math, which Michael's sharing with you, it is absolutely staggering. Now, huge chunks of that are priced in already. If you look, the value of the THORCHAIN now is way over and above what is currently staked in this current math. So the only question, but if you think about where this can mature to and how deep these pools can get and how likely you think these pools will get deep, the numbers on the other end are absolutely terrifyingly exciting. For Rune holders. So that's an interesting one. Michael, I would love to talk more, but I've got to be respectful. You did give me a hard limit because you've got something else to go to. Could I ask a quick favor? You've mentioned thorchain.community. I bet you there's a whole other bunch of resources that I am not familiar with yet. Maybe when you get a moment, if you could send me a few links. So is there a THORCHAIN block explorer? Can I see a nice cool website which shows me the depths of all of the different pools? All of this kind of stuff. If you could give me a list of those, I'll put them in the description. I think it'll be fascinating to go through those. Thank you so much. Oh, I do have one more question. Hang on, but one more. Can you buy Rune on SHAPESHIFT?
You can buy Rune on SHAPESHIFT. SHAPESHIFT is just a front end to the THORCHAIN system. There are many other front ends to THORCHAIN, but yes, absolutely, you can use SHAPESHIFT to do it. And if you do use SHAPESHIFT to do it, SHAPESHIFT adds no fees on top of it, but we do give you Fox tokens for every swap that you do using the SHAPESHIFT interface. So you actually earn more from your swaps using SHAPESHIFT than you would using any other front end to THORCHAIN. Just keep in mind that any swap you do with a SHAPESHIFT interface, you are not swapping with SHAPESHIFT. You are swapping with THORCHAIN. We're just making a nice website to make it easy for you to do.
And do you still need to create an account at SHAPESHIFT to achieve this, or is that not necessary anymore?
No, you do not. You can bring your keys, whether your keys are in a hardware wallet or in a software mnemonic, you can bring your keys to SHAPESHIFT, hook them up to the SHAPESHIFT website, and trade instantly with the THORCHAIN system without any KYC.
Okay. But still not, are you exposing your keys to SHAPESHIFT in that way, or are you still keeping them?
Never. No, SHAPESHIFT never looks at your keys. We never have any ability to move your funds. But with that freedom that you get, you also get more responsibility. You need to back up your private keys, because if you don't, SHAPESHIFT can't do anything to help you. So always make a backup, and you can absolutely use SHAPESHIFT without creating any account or without creating or providing any of your personal information.
KYC, AML. Okay, absolutely awesome. I do have so many more questions, but I know you have to go. Michael, thank you so much for this. For everybody else, guys, let me know in the description below. Did this conversation blow your mind? To me, it totally changes the dynamics of the entire market. As Michael kind of said, I've come to the same conclusion. Why do you need to leave Bitcoin? There's a reason to leave Bitcoin now. There's cool things you can do with other coins that you can't do with Bitcoin. After this, I asked the question, why do you need to leave Bitcoin? I think it sets up an incredible opportunity where Bitcoin becomes, I mean, it already is, but layer one of the internet. And I think it really solidifies that. I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist, not by a long stretch, but it makes me extremely bullish on Bitcoin. Let me know in the comments below. Did this blow your mind? Is this something you're interested in? Does it change your investment thesis? Do you want to hear more from Michael? Do you want to hear more from THORCHAIN experts? And by the way, make sure you subscribe, because coming up, I think in a week or two, I'll be interviewing Eric Voorhees, CEO of SHAPESHIFT, absolute legend in the industry. And you'll definitely want to see that interview as we talk about the broader economy, cryptocurrency economy, and how this affects it. Guys, thank you so much. Take care. Thank you, Michael. And we'll see you guys soon. Bye.